Oh, let me take my seat here.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel.
Yeah.
And thank you, Master Reed, for being here.
Oh, well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be in Nara, where you live.
Yes.
Lucky guy.
It's beautiful, but my house is not as quiet as here. And we were talking before 30 minutes before. It's like, did you hear that? And you're like, no. I'm like, exactly. So quiet. And
Yeah.
it's really beautiful. You can hear all of the ice and the snow from the roofs.
Yeah, melting off and just drops. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. I
Yeah.
love it. So we did this Shodo X Shakuhachi sort of collaboration thing.
At the Izayoi Sanso.
Yes.
We definitely put it. This is an incredible place. You can actually come here and stay as many nights as you like. And we had an amazing feast yesterday with the irori. We had boar meat and deer.
Shishishka.
Yeah.
And it was Nara deer as well.
Yeah.
Very, very delicious. And also chicken and of course mixed vegetables.
Oh,
it was really good.
Incredible. Yeah.
Yes.
Roasted on the sumi.
Yeah, over sumi as well.
Yeah.
You just can't beat that. If you really want to feel, do a time slip coming here and staying here for the even a couple days, you really feel like you've gone back 150 years.
And we even had some old ancient style candles, like
the old rosoku.
Yeah, which are tapered up, so they're wider at the top, and then they gradually burn down. You often see them in the samurai movies, but and that produced two things: first of all, flickering light, and secondly, shadows, which is incredible. Because usually you think of calligraphy as just the finished product of what you see painted on the page, and oftentimes people will say, well, what does it say? Yeah, you can translate it, but it doesn't really take you into the experience, A, of seeing it actually produce, the movement, or B, the ambience and everything going on around it, like the shadows.
Yes.
The shadow dance was incredible.
Yes, and we're definitely going to have to get into that as well.
Yeah.
So first off, what we did, the whole thing was is that we came out to this home, and our plan was to meld the aesthetics of shakuhachi and calligraphy and create a piece of artwork through the video medium and just see what happens. And I think that this experiment was wildly successful, especially with what the additional dimension that the camera can add. When we go to a performance, whether it be a musical performance or it be a calligraphy performance, you get to sit in your seat and you get to see it, and that's nice.
You're limited to where you're sitting.
Exactly. Yeah. So here we have super close-up imagery, which is where that shadow came in. Yeah. So in the space that we're at right now, actually where the camera is sitting is the same room that we did our collaboration in.
Facing the garden.
Facing the garden. And so everything, last night everything was closed, it was very dark, and we had the entire room lit with candles.
And a lantern, which gave it a beautiful red glow to the entire thing.
So there's one of the cameras that was sitting over the calligraphy, what gave a red hue to the entire imagery, which was very like classical Japanese light. And what I loved so much about with that hue with the candle is the way that the shadow danced on the page as you were playing.
Yeah. And the other thing from the painter's point of view, you can't really, it's quite dark, so it's like dancing in the dark, but with your brush. You can't see exactly. Are we okay there?
Oh yeah, let's see. I think that's just, it's just telling me my battery is going a little bit. That's okay.
Okay.
Just go battery mode. I think I might have to click that.
Click that, yeah.
Oh, well then I think now it'll be charging. Just check here. Oh yeah, now it's charging.
Okay.
Yeah. But there we go. We're still good.
Okay.
So, but yeah, and I also, there was an interesting comment that you made yesterday too, which is when you're painting it, it was like most people would probably say, I can't really see what you're doing. Like I can't really see the characters. Like, that's not the point.
That's not the point.
The whole entire point is the whole ambiance. Like, you're gonna see the painting later in light. It'll be hung up and everything. Yeah. But there's the movement, the breath, the music, just the way the energy shifts in the room is what really creates the experience.
And a favorite book for both of us is Tanizaki Junichiro's In Praise of Shadows.
It's a great book.
Love that book because he lived in, instead of having the natural materials of wood and water and stone and that they had been accustomed to, suddenly they've got metal and glass.
Scene in the book where he talks about a restaurant that it's still there in Kyoto, but it's no longer in the traditional style. Unfortunately, they've modernized as well since the book came out. But he talked about that it was an unagi shop, where you can get eel, and he said that there, what the restaurant continued to do until that day when he was writing, was that they lit the dinner table with candles, and so you couldn't really see everything that you were eating. But what he was commenting on was how the lacquer of the dishware would reflect against the light of there, and all the shadows that were created, and that you have like this ensemble on the on your table that's dancing through the flickering of the light, and as you're eating, and he said like that was right there, that was the whole entire experience for him. Was just, not only is it great food, but you're focused on so many things, which is the aesthetic of shadow and light.
And now we have another version, a sort of super modern version of this reflected light and everything being bright and clear, and that's like 8K cameras. I mean, I do a lot of work on television. Everything is so bright, and especially the young women who are announcers, they don't like it at all because you can see the pores of the skin. You know, I mean, it's like you see everything in crystal clear detail. And it's really the opposite of what we've been talking about and what we experienced last night.
You know, it's like the hyper-real, like thinking in Western art, there's like the hyper-realism where it's the oil paintings that's like just very, very meticulous on every single, where you can see the painters painting in the pores of the person. And then you have like someone like Monet who's trying to...
Impressionist.
Trying to move away from that. If you look up really close, you don't get the image of it. It doesn't make any sense, but you back away from it and you look at everything together, and then you see what the artist is trying to say. And I think in some way, I think there's a connection to that bleeds over to the Japanese culture. Of course, definitely from a different lens, from a different worldview. But I think that might be a starting point for the Western eye and the Western ear to travel over to Japan to make some sort of connection.
Well, the Impressionists for sure, but even going back farther into the Renaissance, like Da Vinci was famous for creating this effect called sfumato, which means smoked or sort of vague and ambiguous, and it was done by creating very thin films of paint over and over again, which essentially erases the outlines. So everything is connected not by a line, but by a gradation of some sort. There aren't any real boundaries if you look closely at the Mona Lisa. It's a kind of a smoked, misty sensation,
So no one has seen the project yet. I haven't edited the videos, haven't edited audios, or anything like that. But for people who are looking forward to this release, which will probably be next week, around Friday, Saturday, what do you think that was the most successful part of the performance?
I don't necessarily want to point to a particular piece, but for me, the most interesting thing was to encounter so many variables. It's almost like going to a party and meeting a lot of new people, and you need to communicate with them and create harmony with all these different elements. So you've got a candle, we've got the shakuhachi, we've got the space and setting the stage essentially. That was really, really interesting. And plus, I should say, one of the star feature is this piece of Nara that I received from a Mr. Sugimoto, who lives part-time in Nara. And this is what makes this particularly unique is, it's not unique as sumi because it includes the binding that holds the ink particles together is called nikawa, and it's made from the bones of deer. And this is from mountain deer in Nara. So it's a binding, but it also, I think it affects the flow of ink onto the paper, and particularly, as we'll show you in a few minutes, the chromatic effect. So the particles are quite tiny, but if the binding that is used is kind of sticky and heavy, then it will block the flow of the particles. But I didn't sense that at all. It just went well, and so you end up with a really nice halo around the strokes.
Yeah, there was times I was watching you when I was playing, and I could see just how smooth the ink was just going on the page, and I got to watch it bleed out.
Yeah.
And I got to see the halo even forming.
Yeah, even forming.
Right in front of me. It was really, really interesting. I was getting distracted. I had to stop looking and go back and focus on my own thing.
Well, this is the first one that we did, and you can hold the other side. And what it says is mokurai, which means silent thunder. And it's done with the Kodai moji, so it's kind of the ancient script. But I don't know if you can see this in the camera here, but there's this halo effect. So you see the stroke where the brush traveled, and then the water carries the ink particles out, and it creates a beautiful halo effect. So that was really. This was the first one we did, and then this was a kind of a delightful. It dripped. Like Jackson Pollock style.
Yeah, or it's like what Bob Ross would say. There's only happy accidents.
Or it's like the mole on the face that makes it a character, Marilyn Monroe.
Yes.
But it dripped on the way to here, and I thought, oh, nice. So yeah, mokurai. This is a Zen phrase, silent thunder. So how would you experience, or how would you interpret silent thunder in shakuhachi?
I really struggled with that with playing, because when I think of silent thunder, I'm thinking of like inner turmoil, or something that hits you, that changes you completely, and it's not something anybody else hears, anybody else experiences, but it really shakes you, like when the thunder is so loud and just so powerful, so close to you, it shakes the entire house. And that's what I was thinking about, and just thinking of big motions, but they almost big motions that want to happen. Like you want to be able to express it to someone and show somebody and tell somebody what that experience was like, but no one understands it unless they had experienced the silent thunder themselves. They would never have known.
Well, it's such a Zen phrase, because I mean, you think the sound of one hand clapping, it's similar, right?
Yes.
So there is no sound, but there is a sound like impact or reverberation that just hits you. Bam! It's like an insight. And I think silent thunder is a wonderful name for that. But this was the first one. So using, again, this wonderful sumi from Mr. Sugimoto, and just trying to work, this is Yamanashi Teisuki handmade paper, and just seeing how the two work, because you don't really know until you actually start painting how it's going to come out. So it's meeting new elements, meeting new people, and what that does, hopefully, is it shifts your mind away from yourself, because it's not about you or painting. It's the whole ambience and experience of it.
I always found that really difficult as an artist myself, is balancing the ego and the music, because no matter what we do, we're artists, we're performers, we have to put some of ourselves in there. I mean, and the act of doing the art is egotistical in its core, but balancing it out, where what I almost feel sometimes too, and we talked about this as well in our pre-combo, is like sometimes the shakuhachi for me would do something unexpected, and I just have to go with it and just say, okay, if that's what you want to do, we're going to go for it. And I remember one point in one of the other pieces, I said, I want to do that again. And the shakuhachi said no, we're not doing that again. And I'm betting the brush does the same thing. Like you get such a great effect, and then you go, I want that, but it's not about you.
You can't really repeat it. And it's more like you have to listen to the materials. I don't know if listen is. You have to use all your senses to engage with the materials. And I've heard this in, like, even you look at the stone walls in a castle, and there's just a perfect fit. I mean, it's like you couldn't find a better fit, and you wonder how they actually found stones and bringing in from far distances and made them fit so well. It's incredible. And I talked to someone who knew about the stonemasons. He says, you listen to the stones, and they will tell you. You turn it, what angle, like the stones talk, right? So, definitely listening to materials. And then the second one we did, this was a combination of, so Sean asked me for what's the theme. So I said the theme is dance. So this is the ancient script character for mai, or to dance. And so that sort of set the keynote for then. And then the poem below, this means that the beautiful maidens dance late into the night with robes of, I'm told it's not silk, but it's a silk-like material, dance and sing late into the night.
Oh yeah, it's the robes that are
Ra.
common in ra, which is different than ro.
Ro.
But they're both summer kimonos,
okay,
right?
summer kimonos,
Which I find interesting that we're in wintertime.
Yeah.
Doing it. So
I
mean, it's like almost like a longing for like I want summer to come back
Nah.
to experience this.
Yeah. And then the theme or the style of the calligraphy that is social, which is a grass writing. It's the most difficult to read, but it's the most fluid. And I drew my inspiration from this from a Song Dynasty calligrapher.
2,000 years back.
Yeah.
Only a few thousand.
But he was such a Taoist. I guess what they would often do is they would, by their education, they would gain some civil servant position, and then maybe they become high up in the government, and then they get just sick of government politics and all the jockeying for power and stuff. And so then they retire to, or either they retire on their own or they're sent against their will, some way out in the boonies, as we would say, where they couldn't even understand the dialect. But nature was the same. And so he's such a Taoist, and everything that he paints is all about this fluid dance-like motion. It's all these connected strokes. So that was really fun. And also using 2 different brushes.
Can you quickly explain the different types of like characters that are used? So, for example, like the ancient style versus the cursive style, the semi-cursive.
Well, there are essentially 5 major scripts. The one that we mostly think of as kanji is based on what we see as fonts, and the fonts actually came from that's called kaisho, which is the block style or printed style where every stroke is articulated, and if you count strokes, you would count them in kaisho. And then there's gyosho, which is a semi-cursive, where some of those strokes are slightly connected or they would bleed in one to the other. And then there's sosho, which is the fully cursive style, where you might have like four strokes that would be abbreviated into one. And so sometimes it's hard to read, but it is, there are definite rules, like a line on the left would mean one thing and not another. So they are, it's not just somebody's feeling, it's actually a coded thing. The thing that most people don't realize is that Sosho actually came first.
Yeah, that blew my mind when you told me that.
Yeah.
I always thought it was the other way
you
around.
would think, you start with the printed style and you gradually break it down into the fluid motion. Well, no, actually, Sosho came first. And preceding Sosho, you had this kind of tensho, which is what we think of as the ideographs or the pictographs. And they're quite ancient looking, but they also look very modern. I love the phrase, you learn something new from the old, right? But they're one stroke at a time, and they're very time consuming to write. And the ancient scribes had to write a lot of text because they didn't have printing presses yet, right? So they would have to actually hand copy. So they made another style called the reisho, which is kind of the wave-like motion. It was faster to paint. So that would be called the scribe script. And then somebody said, well, we need to even abbreviate this more, so they went to Sosho, the grass script, grass writing. And then that was hard for people to read, so they would break it down. And then today we have fonts, which come from the kaisho.
Nice.
Yeah. But yeah, this was an interesting one. And then did a third one, which was.
And these 2 that we just showed you were at the evening version of our.
Yeah, and this one as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you can hold that. And so this again is by Tenke, sort of that style. It was just social, and so it means of their own. Clouds move about, swirl about, and fly. So the clouds above, in this motion that he's obviously, connecting to nature in this Taoist sense. But here too, you see the beautiful halo effect, because you can see exactly where the strokes were, and then the water, which is by the way well water from where we are, so it's right out of the ground, and then not a deer, the binding. Which I think helps the flow, because it's difficult to create this halo chromatic effect it's not just by having water. I think that the binding actually is a releasing function as well. And what else? This, I don't know if you can see it from there, but when you use hand ground ink, and
I can put this one closer.
Yeah, okay. But when you use hand ground ink, and one stroke passes over another, you would think that it would, let's see, where are we? Yeah, down here. You would think that it would go over it, but in fact it seems to pass under it. So this is the sequence. So this stroke actually looks like it passes under, even though it came afterwards. So you think it went over, but it looks like it's passing under. There's another one. Yeah. So see, this came later, but it looks like it doesn't go on top of it. It looks like it's crossing under it. It's a really interesting, curious effect. But I think whatever comes first kind of captures the territory, so you can't really paint on top of it. So it creates the impression that you're actually going under it, but in fact it went over it.
And what's really interesting about, and how I understand Western art, is that it's the reverse. You always have to paint the background first, and then you paint on top of that. When we're talking oil paints.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that the Sumi does the exact opposite. You actually have to paint forward, and then always backwards too.
Yeah. Well, and it creates an effect, a sense of perspective or depth. But this is a very Taoist theme, the clouds, which is essentially a picture of the nose, or when Japanese refer to themselves, they point to their nose. So it's the self, but through the nose, the breathing, and then the heart, the mind. So the heart, the essence of the self is breath. And that must be an important theme for
Absolutely.
Shakuhachi.
It's a very important theme for Shakuhachi.
And for living in general as well. So that was an interesting experience. So how would you connect, say, breathing? Well, breathing obviously to create sounds.
Well, I always I come from a Christian worldview, and the Christian knows of Adam to create his life. And so when I play Shakuhachi, I almost feel like I'm reenacting that moment every time I breathe in, and then creating life through the instrument. Because the philosophy of playing, I always feel a lot more connected to the pieces because it's a lot more of myself, and it's really being exposed. So when I play on stage, when I make a video, or when people hear me play, we're really hearing the essence of me filling the room. And I think that's why when we hear artists or we see artists, you either really like them or you really just kind of don't like them at all. It could be like extremes, and I think a lot of times it falls into that middle ground of like, it's not bad, not good. I'd be friends with them. We can get a beer. But then you find those some performances where the person's essence, you just go, wow, there's something really special about it. Or in the other case, there's something I really hate about it.
Yeah. Well, in Japanese, ikiga-ao, so the breath is timed. And actually, kokyu means breath, but it also means timing. Sono kokyu,
Yes.
Yeah. And then you also have the aun kokyu, the two guardian dogs.
Yes.
Yeah, the neo, and also the guardian dogs, one with the mouth open, and then so the beginning, the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end.
And I love that idea too. It's so interesting because I'm sure we know that it's not really but actually right, the sound there, and then the other one is which is that like the idea of the final breath, and then it ends, and then there's the death. So moment of exerting strength and making life, and then the last weak one. It's a very interesting too. Of also the beginning and end is what you were saying. Alpha omega.
Well, and when a child is born, they say in Japanese, "Oh yeah," they say that's the first sound, right? And then the last sound is they say "iki o hikitoru," so it's a withdrawing. So there's the aun even within a single lifetime. Yeah, it's deep stuff. Yeah,
it's deep stuff.
And then the next one, this is the character for I, which I wrote here in Kaisho, and it's a tree and an eye. So this looks like an eye. So it's a person standing looking at the tree and appreciating the symbiosis of the relationship. Obviously trees in terms of oxygen, carbon dioxide, we depend on trees very much.
And they depend on us.
And they depend on us, yeah. So it's a symbiotic relationship, which the ancient Chinese expressed as a tree radical with the eye. So maybe seeing or appreciating the tree. And also the collaborations, like you've got Shakuhachi and the calligraphy and putting them together.
And this was a tough one for me to express, and I was sitting there right as I was like hitting the record button. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm gonna do. I was just like, I'm hoping for the best here. And then I sat down, and what you'll hear in the performance is that I decided that I started to play and sing at the same time. And then what I realized was, well, if I move away from a pitch of my voice matches with it, that's the matching. Yeah. And then I thought, oh, if I separate and then I can come back.
You come back, yeah.
And I kept doing that kind of motion of, we constantly do that where we think, I want to be independent.
Yeah.
But there's no such thing. We require other people.
Yeah.
Other people, and not even just other people, but like we said before, there's the nature. Like we need those trees, we need the water, we need all of these things in nature to function properly. Otherwise, we're goners.
Well, even the growth and maturity as infants, of course, we're totally dependent. You can't do anything for yourself. And fortunately, because you're cute, people take good care of you. That's kind of nature's way. Puppies too. They're so cute. You just want to, protect them.
Yeah, you want to help them.
Yeah. And then of course they reach a certain age and they want to be independent, and so I'm gonna do this for myself. They don't want anybody's advice. And then after a while you realize that doesn't work very well. So
it helps that people tend to get less cute as they get older. It's easier.
And then you do have to take care of yourself, and then you realize you can't do it by yourself. So then you reach the more mature stages, interdependence.
It's somewhere between the peach fuzz and your first whisker.
So in effect, you're going for this interdependence or symbiotic appreciation of symbiotic. So you are helping, but you're also separating. You really have the best of both. Yeah. So that was an interesting. And the textures. Can you comment on what you see in the way?
Yeah, there's
a different kind of paper, right?
What's interesting is I see I don't know if that's bamboo. So it's bamboo flakes, that are inside and I guess that would also change the way that the ink in the brush attack against the paper. So there's a lot more like roughness, and I can see more individual goat hair brush strokes against the paper. Yeah, it's really nice.
The feel of the paper is a little bit stiffer, right?
It's much more stiffer.
Yeah.
Or much more stiff.
Much more stiff. Yeah.
That's the other thing too. We both speak what is that? The EFL is English as a forgotten language.
As a forgotten language, right? And then this one, do you know what this is the character representing?
Yes. So you told me this one. This is the rainbow, but it's actually the androgynous two-headed dragon that's coming down to drink water.
Male and female. You can see the mouth is open and coming to drink, and here's the horns or antenna. And that's so the ancient Chinese would notice that a rainbow would often occur after rain, and they associated it with water, clearly. And they would imagine, because they see dragons everywhere, that this was a two-headed dragon and dipping down to drink water. Now, I had an amazing synchronistic experience recently. I live in Kofu, which is on one side of Mount Fuji, and we went to the other side, Shizuoka, and there's this place called the Five Goryu no Taki, so 5 waterfalls, and then 5 dragon waterfalls. And so, I'm taking this really nice picture with my gimbal and stuff, and suddenly, sometimes the light plays tricks a little bit, and then it'll create a kind of a rainbow effect or something, sort of look like a golden ball kind of shining. Well, this rainbow actually did come down, and there was a river right at the base of the waterfalls, and it came down. I said, "Oh, this is so cool!" But usually it's so ephemeral. You think, well, nice, but it's going to be gone in a moment. It stayed. It not only stayed, but it performed. It went down, and you could see it kind of dipping in and drinking, and I just held it for the longest time. It was and then the people there told me that there are a lot of dragon spirits in that around that, which is why they call it the 5 Dragon Falls. But that was an amazing experience. But it was partly amazing, not just because it was beautiful to see, but because I knew the character for Rainbow was actually a dragon.
Yeah, that's so cool, because then you get to draw the connection. It's interesting for me too, for my brief time trying my hand at calligraphy and learning where the characters come from, and then you go out and you see the tree and you go, oh, I see it now. Or if you see like all these different how they're building the different radicals and putting them together to create meanings, it makes the understanding of the Eastern mind much more clear in how they view their relationship, at least the classical Eastern mind, and how they view nature and themselves.
You know, this also makes a great story for kids, because kids can so easily, small kids or even elementary school, you know, up to 3rd, 4th grade, whatever, they can relate to these things so much. It's almost like reading a storybook. And recently at Irinji we did a we had an exhibition, and one of the pieces was this, and then I wrote a haiku underneath it. And it says, what a wonderful day for an afternoon nap under the rainbow. That was the haiku that came underneath it. So anyway, there were these kids that came for a mothers and children's tea ceremony class. And so the tea master said, oh, why don't you like explain, you can hear this from an American, explain what this is. It's pretty easy to explain because it's a picture, right? And the kids were like so wide-eyed, and it was like they could just relate to it so well. And so I thought, oh yeah, Terakoya, we need to create a temple school and bring the kids, and then so because they're not going to hear this kind of story at school. Yeah, so that was interesting. And then,
so we had those 2 performances. We had one last night, which was in this room, everything was shut. And then we had this morning's one, which is now out in the open. We had, this is exactly how we had set up. We used this table. I was standing outside. And what was the difference between being more locked in with the nature of the candle versus being integrated with the nature outside?
With the greatest candle of all.
The pretty bright one out there.
Yeah. Well, it was a very different experience because, first of all, as I mentioned last night, I couldn't really see that clearly what it's kind of a romantic feeling. I mean, not for you.
I like you, but I don't like it like that.
No, don't go there. But it was a kind of a we had the rose-colored lantern, and then the shadows, and it was just kind of mysterious and.
There was definitely like a field of energy that was different inside there, that you could feel like, wow, we're getting down to business. This is a very serious moment. Every stroke counts.
And a time slip feeling, like this is back in Edo period or something, because we had the tapered candle that you often see in the samurai movies and stuff, and the flickering shadows. It was just it was awesome. It was.
Now, for you, this is how I kind of felt it. I was feeling like when I was playing and when you were painting, I was thinking, wow, we're like 10 minutes in, and then I looked at the finished product, like, it was only 4 minutes. It felt like everything was just being
the sense
shifted.
of time was stretched. Well, we also in the intro thing, you played while I ground the ink, and that was really interesting because the not only do you have the sound of grinding, which you may not be able to hear too well, but then you get this wonderful sound, and you would be tapping on the shakuhachi, and then I'd pick that up. You know? So you have this kind of conversation starting even before the whole thing begins. But then this morning, to answer the second half of your question, is it's much brighter. You can obviously see what you're doing. Plus, I'm focusing only on a single character, writing ancient characters, and the sounds of the snow melting and falling off the roof. That was just a great auditory punctuation.
I have to tell you, I thought it was my wife opening and closing a door for a second.
And
I was like, what is she doing? She knows we're recording. And then I kind of look over and I go, oh, it's
the snow falling. Just don't stand under it, right? But I guess, and this is the last piece that I painted this morning, which means basically, the brush mind, or the mind, it's like the brush has a will of its own. I often tell my students, you can't rush the brush.
That's a good one.
And you need to listen to it and pay attention to the point of contact with the paper and the flow of the ink and all these things. It's like an extension of you. And we talked about also the kimyaku, or the line that connects the strokes, because between here and here and when the brush is off the page, it's still alive in your hands, and it doesn't stop. And then you want to move from just not only creating a connection of the invisible strokes of the key line or the key pulse, if you will, but also with the movements of your body. And I think that explains the calligraphy proverb, furo fushi, which literally translates as doesn't age, doesn't die. So I guess they thought it was a means of mortality, and that's a little bit Chinese like to exaggerate. So I prefer to say perpetual youth and longevity. And calligraphers do live a long time. And I think it's because it affects their breathing, and the movement becomes quite natural.
There's only one other type of person who lives, and I think even longer than calligraphers, which is tea masters. They just, I don't think they do die.
Unless they're forced to come.
Yeah, unless there's, because that's why he had to cut himself. That was the true reason. He just wouldn't die.
Yeah, he wouldn't die.
He just wouldn't die. So God, I thought he was gonna outlive him.
Yeah. So but this to me is kind of the ultimate lesson. It's I don't know much about horseback riding. I've done very little of it, but that I've done, you realize that horse has a will of its own, and the horse knows if you know. So if you the horse decides it wants to eat and you let it eat, oh God, you just gave over control, right? So how you ride the horse without forcing it. It's like natural horsemanship. You're probably familiar with. You know, they don't use a bit in the mouth to create pain. They just have a kind of a rope over the snout of the horse, and they lead it. So for the horse to feel comfortable about being led, to be willing to let the rider ride, requires a sense of unity. And it's so much the same with the brush. If you try to force the brush, it doesn't behave. It doesn't do what you think you're telling it. It actually does exactly what you're telling it to do. But you just don't know what you're telling it to do because you're trying to force it to do something. So you really need to wait and some pauses. Sometimes you're just listening, and then the angle and everything. So it's all this stuff you can't write down in a manual because it's different every time.
You know, I think that's something that if people would also, they don't like to have complete control over it. And it's one of the great conversations of determinism versus free will. And I'm a compatibilist, and you know there's limitations to what we can to go down. But it's like the brush in some ways too. It feels like it knows better in many sense. The same with the shakuhachi. It knows better than me. Like, no, we're not doing that again. Stop thinking that you're going to do it. Move on to something else. Yeah,
there was a set of variables that made it work the first time that have changed, so it's not going to work that way again. Yeah.
Another thing too that I was thinking about with the difference between the evening performance and the morning performance too is much more collaborating elements. So we had like a singular powerful element, which was the lanterns and the candlelight. But this time we had some birds. We had like the wind sounds coming in too, which I found really interesting because there is no wind. Like this entire time we've been talking, there's been no large breeze coming in. But when we performed, the wind kept coming in as if it was like, I'll join in too, and I'll give you something. It was very interesting.
Yeah, you know this is really hard to understand, and people say, oh, it just happened that way. But I've experienced some amazing synchronicities. There's a shrine in front of Mount Fuji called Kawaguchiko Asama Jinja. And every year I go and there's a torii gate right in front of Mount Fuji with no electric wires, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. And I go and I paint the character for the year. So like last year was the year of the tiger, and then this year's the year of the rabbit. And I do that in front of Mount Fuji, and then I give the calligraphy to the shrine. Well, last year, the year of the tiger, I had, it was actually quite a larger brush than this, but I had the big brush and I painted the character for Tora, for tiger. And I laid it down, I had a bowl of sumi ink, so I laid it down in the ink like this. And then I was getting my seal ready to fix, and suddenly I noticed there was smoke or steam or something coming out of the bowl. I thought, what's that? And I went over, my brush was on fire. And seriously, and it was a bigger, this is called tsubo, which means a pot, but it's where the brush stem holds the ink. And it literally was on fire, so when I saved my brush, I blew it out, and it had, it made the shape of a dragon's eye, which was amazing, because there's actually a proverb, Garyo Seiten, which means that the finishing touch for the painting is the dragon's eye. And it was the year of the tiger, and the Takeda Shingen was the warlord in the Civil War period. He was considered the tiger of Kai, of the country Kai, and his arch enemy was the dragon of Ichigo. And so it was almost like the dragon said no. And so anyway, I had this piece of this brush with a dragon eye burned into it. You know how like you take a magnifying glass, you can burn a hole in a leaf. I think that's sort of what was happening, but it just happened then. And then I told this to a French friend of mine. He says, "Oh, well, I'll get you on my internet television program." So we're talking, and I understand a little French, and I realized he was talking about, oh, William was so passionate for his calligraphy, it was on fire. And said, no, David, my brush really did catch fire. Look, here's the hole, right? But he knows the passion of it. But that was it's so bizarre how nature kind of participates, as you say.
It's all, and not even just the wind and like sunlight. I mean, I love it when it's a cloudy day and I finish a piece and then the sun comes out.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, why weren't you there for the video?
Yeah.
But also the birds chirping and kind of communicating with it too. You know, I've been out in the deep in the mountains, and you start playing and all the birds get really quiet, and then like I stop playing and then they kind of chirp a little bit, and then I play something, and it's like this kind of call and response thing. Now if that's truly what's happening, I don't know, but it's cool nonetheless that that's the effect that happens and how we perceive it. Is that communication.
Yeah, you wonder what the birds, because birds would be very sensitive to, you know, the meaning of bird calls among their own kind, but just, and I just wonder what they think of, what kind of bird is there?
Must be a big bird.
Big bird. Yeah, that's really interesting. So nature, and we talked about this, getting back to the what I think is the core takeaway for me this time is In Praise of Shadows, and realizing it's not just the shadows on the page, but it's the environment, the changes and the environment. You know, it's taking you out of yourself and connecting you to nature and to materials. It's an amazing experience, and we don't often get that when we live in very artificial environments with lots of steel and glass and electricity and electric light, and everything's bright.
Yeah, I believe it was Takamitsu who was talking about how awful it is that homes have windows.
No.
Because he says it's like it makes nature, it makes you distant from nature because it acts like a television screen to nature. Rather with these traditional Japanese homes like this one, like when the fusuma closes, you don't see outside.
Yeah.
But when you open it up, then you're right outside and you're engaged in nature rather.
Yeah.
So it's a much different approach because even like a lot of the hotels I've stayed at in Japan, they're very beautiful and you can open up the windows and you see these gorgeous gardens, but how much better is it when you just open it up and then you're in the garden?
You're in the garden, yeah.
It's not a painting on a wall, it's something you can experience.
Yeah. And of course Japanese gardens all are just profoundly meaningful. The stones all have symbolism and everything. The mitate bunka, you know, that this stands for this stands for this points to this points to that. I find that so interesting. That people couldn't maybe travel as easily in the past because they'd have these sekisho, you know, you had to have the right papers and you needed permission to travel.
Yes.
So somebody would go somewhere and they'd bring back either what we call a souvenir, or they would paint, or they would recreate that garden in miniature in their own space. So this is like, and then you can see Mount Fuji and everything.
Yes. And it's interesting, 2 years ago I went to your land.
Yeah.
Where you hail from. And we went to Rinjin.
Rinjin, yeah.
And they have a massive garden, which is actually a reflection of a miniature version of the entire thing. So it's almost
the mountain behind it, and the shigendo, the mountain shamans would train there. And in fact, the garden designer Musou Kokishi, who lived in the Kamakura period, he designed that, and he actually trained in the cave and then came down and recreated. In a sense, you know, you can't all go to the cave, so he recreated it. This is like the 1350s or something.
Yeah, and it's so cool because it's like looking at a map of the entire land, but it's not just any map. It's the physical. It's really right there. It's quite incredible.
Yeah. We need to do some more things at Irinji.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a beautiful spot. I love that place. And all the original like teapots that they have, the original calligraphy, the natural reverberation in that space too is really nice. It's not overbearing at all. There's no audio editing necessary to create space. It's already there. And of course, with it being high ceilings and tatami floors, you get the warmth of the tatami, but then you get the space of the room. It's very nice.
Yeah, we often take students there as like a favorite retreat spot.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really enjoyed my time there and walking through. And of course, the nightingale floors.
They squeak when you walk, and it's supposed to warn you of intruders, but there's a wooden plank right next to it that doesn't make any sound.
Yes, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, but no, that was often used though to signal the entrance of a person. You know, that they walk and it squeaks. You know, every time you take a step, and that would alert anyone.
The Japanese in the Edo period, I just thought it was they keep cats as pets.
Yeah, cats. Yeah, and dogs. Oh,
it's just
natural ninja.
Natural, yes.
Yeah, well, this was a great experience, and give us some great ideas for how to continue this, even in not just filming, but actually as a performance.
Yes, absolutely. So, I'm looking forward to seeing how it can now change to the next medium, which is a live performance, and how we can use cameras and projection exactly to create this, the next level of trying to get this communication between the shakuhachi and the calligraphy. There's so much intertwined in it, and when I did my 6 months of study, intensive study for calligraphy, there was just so much I learned. It's like, wow, I have that same thing in Shakuhachi. That's in Shakuhachi too. We have that, and there's this thing that we do, and then calligraphy has a name for it. So I've adopted that into when I teach my students, and I use that to help them understand some concepts of what I really want them to do and play. Yeah. No, there's such a great crossover. Anything that has Michi on the end of it, the path, you know, they all lead to the same place, you know. Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of the Shakuhachi schools end with Liu, and the flow. The flow. But not that's really our way. My teacher's teacher never really liked the name of it, but they call it the. My teacher's teacher's teacher was Watazumi, and he created his own school, which is called Watazumi Do, which was the Michi. And so it's more of free expression and trying to, take how you feel and what you're thinking about, what you want to say, and matching that with what the music is. And it's really embodying the idea of soul from the Shingo soul. And many of the other styles that I hear, we get a lot of shin, we get a lot of gyo, but very rarely we get soul. And we talked about it over an hour about that before too. And even then, how many years you've been working with soul, and then you do a 45-minute conversation, and you go, I think I have to rethink soul again.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, the thing with social or grass writing or fully cursive writing is it's easy to kind of get caught up in the flow and get washed away with it, because there are actually a lot of stopping points and points where you turn the corner. I don't know if you can see it in this, but where you literally, you retrace, you come here and you come back here and then come out, or you kind of wrap. It's hard to see this without being up close, but you write on top of what you just wrote, and then you'll circulate through the stroke again. And
I think that's the biggest struggle for myself when doing a piece that's in that soul style, is that things can get disconnected where one breath now doesn't make sense to the next breath, and you get so pulled apart from it. And so my teacher gave me great advice for it, which was that if you play each line five times different ways, you can get a bunch of different shapes, and you start choosing which one you like. And then what I decided to do afterwards, I said, okay, well, I'm going to play the whole thing and record myself, and then just see what works and what didn't work. And then I have to realize, okay, look, this, as much as I like it, doesn't fit with everything else around it, so I have to change it, and then to mix it to blend together, because there is a blend and a flow that needs to happen. And one thing that you said that really helped make it even more easier for me to explain to my students was in sword training, you count the strokes, and then when you go to Gyo and So, you start to lose the count, and it becomes more like one. one full movement all the way to the end.
Yeah.
And then it's like, that's exactly what I wanted to do with Shakuhachi.
Okay. Yeah. Well, of course, you can count the strokes, but each stroke actually has a count of 3, because there's the kihitsu. I'm talking about kaisho now.
Yes.
That's the opening, or fudeo okiru. So it's like waking up, arousing the brush, where it literally spreads out like a fan. And then there's the sohitsu, where you send the brush. That's the movement. And then there's the shuhitsu, where you bring it back together. So it opens and closes like a fan. Again, like breathing.
Yeah, and we do that with Shakuhachi too, where we have the starting sound. And one thing I explain to my students is that we don't actually tongue or push the breath out. We actually, when we close the mouth to make our first sound, there's a little bit of excess air that's in the oral cavity. So then when you go, a little bit of air comes out, and that starts your sound. And then you push out afterwards. And it's very similar to like calligraphy, right? And then even more so, you guys have kukaku, which is the stroke before you play, and there's the before you write. And we do the same thing. We have to
like the
breathe.
Airborne.
Yeah, the airborne, and that's our breath in. In order to think of what kind of sound we're gonna make and what's gonna come out next. Is how the breath comes in is gonna be how the breath comes out. Like, and what I give my students for an example is like, we take like Mozart's Einiglein and Nacht music, and when you breathe in that, that's dun dun dun, and that's the kind of breath. But now if I want to do like Air on G by Bach, and I go dun, it's like that just doesn't work. So that breath in is just as important as the music that comes and flows afterwards. And then of course after that, once you have the closing of the brush, and we have the envelope of the sound coming back, and we're starting to slow the air down until it kind of vanishes into nothing. There's the resonance afterwards of still living of the note. It's still resonating in the mind, which is what the calligraphers called the zanshin, the leftover heart, the leftover soul.
Or silent thunder, if you will.
Or silent thunder, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that is so interesting. Well, I think we definitely have got a good thing going here. I'm looking forward to future collaborations. Yeah,
absolutely. Me too. Looking forward to it. So for everybody who's watching or who is seeing this video, stay tuned for the actual collaboration videos to come out, and you'll hopefully you'll enjoy them as much as we enjoyed making them. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
I'd say next time that you go to listen to a recorded piece of Shakuhachi, or next time you go to see a finished product, to realize that you're looking at after the show is over, really. It's the resonance, the residue. It's almost like the cicada has flown and you're looking at the shell, right?
Yes.
Because there was so much that went into it, the movement and the dynamics and all the people and materials that were involved. So just to, I think to recreate that, because you have this, and once you know the stroke order, you can, in your mind, or trace it with your finger, you can actually kind of reproduce, get back into that experience. So not to take the finished product as the, or what does it say? Okay, end of story. No, this is how was it done? What is it? That to me is really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me out here and showing this place to me.
Yeah, it's
also
awesome
of course
place.
the
Izayoi-sanso.
Yes, and I'll leave a link to this location in the description box, and of course I'll leave Will's links as well in the description box, so you can find and contact him and reach out. And so look forward to those videos. If you're not subscribed, subscribe and hit the notification bell that's on there.
Well, yeah.
And then after you, because YouTube has added, of course, has had an additional third step for a long time. Then you have to say how frequently you want to receive video updates.
Three-stage subscription.
Yeah, it's they have two-factor. What is it called?
Verification.
Yeah. But they have three-factor verification already on YouTube.
Wow.
So, but I hope that you guys enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you enjoy the future performances.
Yeah, thank you.